Imagine grinding 18 hours a day in the most popular game ever made. A game where you feel every blow as if it were real, and still being the single worst player on the entire server. And then imagine the system handing you the rarest class in existence, and ordering you to delete everything you have built to claim it. Everyone else in this world picks a clean, sensible path, knight, mage, archer, and climbs it. So why does the game offer its most powerful inheritance to a bankrupt day labourer who cannot win a fight? And why does taking it reset him to the very bottom? Someone left that class lying in a cave on purpose, waiting for exactly the wrong man to find it. And by the end of this recap, you will know who left it, what it truly does, and why the worst gamer alive ends up the most feared figure in two worlds at once. This is Overgeared, and I'm going to walk you through the whole story, beginning to end. Let's get into it. Meet Shin Youngwoo. In the real world, he is the man the world has quietly given up on, drowning in debt, scraping a living through punishing manual labour, hauling bricks and digging ditches on construction sites for money that vanishes the moment it arrives. He is not lazy, he is not stupid, he is simply unlucky in the particular, grinding way that real poverty is unlucky, where every door that opens leads to another bill. So he does what millions do. He escapes into a game. The game is called Satisfy. A full immersion virtual reality world so vast and so lifelike that it has effectively replaced a second economy. People earn real money inside it. People build real careers inside it, and crucially, Satisfy lets you feel pain. A dialed-down echo of real sensation, enough to make every wound, every fall, every defeat sting. Youngwoo went into debt to buy the capsule that lets him play at all, which means the game that is meant to be his escape is also the thing that bankrupted him. Inside Satisfy, he goes by the name Grid, and here is the cruel joke the story opens on. Grid is, by any honest measure, the worst player on the server. His stats are pitiful, his levels cruel. His luck is so legendarily bad that other players treat him as a cautionary tale. He works harder than anyone. He is online longer, grinds more, suffers more, and he has nothing to show for it but calluses on a body that is exhausted in both worlds at once. That is the man we start with. Not a chosen one, not a secret genius. A tired, broken, ordinary man who refuses to stop trying long after a sensible person would have quit. Remember him, because the gap between where he begins and where he ends is the whole point of this story. But weakness is not why this story works. Watch what happens the day Grid's terrible luck finally swings the other way. Grinding alone in a miserable overlooked corner of the map, the northern end cave, a place stronger players never bother with, Grid stumbles onto something no one else has found. An S-rank quest. The highest tier of difficulty the game offers, the sort of thing raid guilds spend months preparing to attempt, dropped into the lap of a man fighting monsters far above his level with gear held together by spite. He completes it. Barely, desperately, by the skin of his teeth, but he completes it. And at the heart of that quest waits his reward, a tome called Pagma's Rare Book. A legendary rated class change book, left behind in that cave long ago by a figure called Pagma, a legendary blacksmith and swordsman whose name the world still half remembers in myth. Grid uses the book, and the system delivers the twist that defines everything that follows. To become Pagma's successor, to inherit the legendary blacksmith class, Grid's character is reset. All those crawling levels, all that suffering, every scrap of progress he clawed out of the worst run of luck on the server, gone. Wiped to zero. The single rarest class in the entire game, and the price of it is everything he had. A reasonable man would despair. Grid has nothing left to despair with. He has spent his whole life starting over from the bottom, and so he simply does it again. Except this time the bottom comes with the gift no other player on Earth possesses, because the legendary blacksmith is not what it sounds like. It is not a support class for crafting other people's swords. Grid can now forge items of a quality no normal smith can touch. Epic grade and beyond. Weapons and armour that simply should not exist at his level. He can wield any weapon and wear any armour in the game without restriction. And every item he makes, he can make for himself. The worst player on the server has just become the only man alive who can build his own power from raw ore, one hammer strike at a time. Here is the rule that breaks the world. Every other player in Satisfy is limited by what they can find, buy, or loot. The best gear in the game is rare, fought over, hoarded by the richest guilds, and most players spend their entire careers a single tier of equipment behind the people above them. Grid does not find his gear, he makes it. This is where the title earns itself. Grid becomes overgeared, a player whose equipment is so far beyond his actual level and skill that the gap becomes absurd. He is still in many ways a clumsy fighter. His reflexes are ordinary, his judgment early on is frequently terrible, but it does not matter nearly as much as it should because he walks into battle wearing items he forged himself that outclass anything his opponents can buy. A weak man in godlike armour, swinging a blade no shop will ever sell. That is Grid, and the story is honest enough to make it funny before it makes it fearsome. So he grinds, the way he has always grinded except now every hour pays. He hammers out his first signature creations, weapons with names and histories, each one a small monument to a man who refuses to stop. His most infamous early forge is a blade so cursed by his own catastrophic luck that it is literally classified as a failure, and yet in Grid's hands, even his failures become weapons that terrify people who did everything right. And because this is Satisfy, the consequences leak into the real world. The items Grid makes are worth real money, the reputation he builds has real value. The man who could not pay his debts hauling bricks begins slowly to climb out of them by the only thing he was ever good at, refusing to quit. The two worlds, game and reality, stop being an escape from each other and start being a single life with very high stakes in both. But raw gear is not enough on its own, and Grid is too weak alone to hold what he is starting to build. He needs people. And against every instinct of a man who has been let down his whole life, he begins to gather them. The elite Tzedakah Guild, a tight-knit band of veteran players who have fought together since before Satisfy even existed, cross paths with him, and what begins as wary cooperation hardens through shared crisis into something Grid has never had. A guild of his own, the Overgeared Guild, a name half-mocking, half-proud, built around the absurd man at its center. But the crafting montage is not why this story matters either. Watch what happens when a national crisis lands and the only man who can stop it is the one nobody respected. The Eternal Kingdom, the northern realm where Grid first scraped his way up, comes under threat from a golem army, an invasion of stone monsters powerful enough to grind an ordinary defense into rubble, the kind of event that decides the fate of cities. And it is Grid, with his self-forged arsenal and his newborn guild at his back, who stands in the gap and breaks the invasion. The reward changes his life. The King of Eternal grants Grid a novel title, a rare history-making honor, and with it a rank, Duke. And to a Duke comes land. Grid is handed the city of Raiden, an exhausted, half-ruined frontier settlement that the kingdom had all but written off. A broke day laborer who could not afford his own rent is now inside the game, a feudal lord with a city to rebuild. What Grid does with Raiden is one of the quiet pleasures of the story. He does not simply sit on a throne, he develops it, pouring his forging income, his guild's labor, and his own dogged practicality into turning a dying city into a thriving one. The man who spent years being ground down by an economy that never gave him a break finally gets to build one that works. And he builds it for the people under his banner, the way he wishes someone had once built one for him. And around him the world keeps widening. Satisfy is not a quiet little MMO, it is a continent-spanning, politically tangled world full of rival kingdoms, ancient races, scheming high-rankers, and powers that are not as fictional as the players assume. Grid's rise puts him on a collision course with the strongest players alive, the established elite, who have ruled the rankings for years and do not take kindly to a former laughingstock muscling onto their continent with gear they cannot replicate. So who is Grid really? And whose story is he finishing? Because the legendary class was never just a power-up, it came with a ghost. Pagma, the legendary blacksmith and swordsman whose book Grid inherited, is not a forgotten footnote. He is one of the great tragic figures of this world's history, a man whose own legend ended in betrayal and ruin, and whose techniques, whose burdens, and whose unfinished business is now sit on the shoulders of a debt-ridden labourer who never asked for any of it. To become a true legend, not merely a player with a rare class, but a genuine power in the world of Satisfy, Grid must step out of Pagma's shadow. He must master the skills the system can teach him, yes, but more than that, he must learn the kind of control that the very strongest beings in this world wield as second nature, and he must do it as himself, not as a copy of a dead man whose path he is walking. The story refuses to let him simply inherit greatness. It makes him earn it fight by fight, forge by forge, until the name Grid means something the name Pagma never could. And the absurd premise, the worst gamer alive becomes a legend, is played here completely straight. Because the climb is real. We do not skip it. We watched a broken man reset to zero, hammer out his own salvation one cursed blade at a time, defend a kingdom, rebuild a city, and stand his ground against players who started with every advantage he never had. So when Grid finally trades blows with the strongest figures on the continent and does not break, it never feels unearned. It feels like the inevitable end of the most stubborn climb in the genre. This is the engine that has carried Overgeared across more than 1,000 chapters of novel. Not a chosen hero handed a destiny, but an ordinary, unlucky, relentlessly hard-working man who was given one impossible tool and simply refused to put it down. Every kingdom he shakes, every elite he humbles, every item that becomes a legend in its own right, all of it grows from the same root. The man the server laughed at would not quit. Grid wins more than he loses, in the end. But the story is careful about what winning costs him, and what it asks of a man who can never quite stop being the loser he started as. Because the two-world structure cuts both ways. Every triumph inside Satisfy is real, with real money and real reputation flowing back to the exhausted man in the capsule. But so is the toll. Grid pours himself into both lives at once, and the story never lets you forget the body slumped in a chair. The family are relying on him. The weight of a debt that did not vanish overnight just because a game handed him a legendary class. His power is enormous and his luck deep down is still cursed. The running joke and the running tragedy of the whole series is that the strongest blacksmith in the world is also the unluckiest man in it. Forever one bad roll away from disaster. Forever clawing victory out of odds stacked against him. And the further he climbs, the higher the stakes rise. What begins as a man trying to pay his rent becomes a man tangled in the politics of kingdoms, the grudges of ancient power, and the unfinished war of a legend long dead. The boy hauling bricks on a construction site would not recognize the figure he becomes. A duke, a craftsman whose name is spoken in awe, a power that nations have to reckon with. And yet, at the center of it all, he is still the same man, stubborn, practical, a little petty, deeply human, working himself half to death because he does not know how to do anything else. That is the trick that Overgeared pulls that so many power fantasies cannot. It gives its hero the rarest class, the best gear, a city, a title, and a legend to inherit, and it never once lets him stop being the tired, unlucky man who earned every scrap of it the hard way. He gets everything, and he is still recognizably the worst gamer on the server who simply would not give up. That is why we root for him. Overgeared began as a web novel by Park Sunal, a sprawling Korean VRM MMORPG epic that ran for well over 1,000 chapters and built one of the most devoted fanbases in the genre. Its manhwa adaptation, illustrated by Team Argo, has carried Grid's climb to a vast new audience, and the English novel and comic are both readily available. The novel through Wuxia World, the manhwa via Webtoon, and the usual aggregators. It is, in many ways, the definitive blacksmith protagonist lit RPG. The story that proved you did not need a sword saint or a chosen hero to carry an epic. Just an ordinary, relentless man with a hammer and the worst luck on the server. If you've ever wanted to watch a single, most overlooked person in a game become a power that two worlds have to fear, and somehow stay completely, stubbornly human while doing it, this is the one that does it best. If this recap held you till the end, subscribe, because Manhwa Recap Vault covers the stories that define the genre, and Overgeared is one of the cornerstones of the VRM MMORPG wave. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next recap.